All right, well, welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I've got an interesting guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and kind of what you do?
Sure, yeah. I'm Danny. I go by Steezy.prime. I am a music producer. I've played around with, all kinds of electronic music styles, but I've been focusing on lo-fi hip-hop recently.
Awesome. Now, can you tell me a little bit about your musical background and how you got started in producing music?
Sure. My parents had me going through piano lessons from basically as young as they let you. And I've kind of done the ringer of orchestra and band instruments, and eventually found myself in a jazz band playing guitar.
Right.
And so I'd say that like 10-year span of my childhood really formed my musical background.
That's awesome for me because I'm a father with a 7-year-old and I'm making her like sit through piano class.
Yeah.
But there was this one point where she just started really enjoying it, and she's been just diving in and just eating the piano up. And I just need a better teacher. My daughter's teacher is great, but she always cancels on me. Not that she's a bad teacher. She's a phenomenal teacher, but she's always busy and she's always traveling. So tricky, man. But balancing.
Yeah. Well, there's always this like natural progression through music. Like it started off as like these classical arrangements that I was learning, and it's not so much fun if you're not like a fan of the music.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until jazz that I really got into it and was motivated by myself and not by my surroundings to really practice and really master what I'm working on.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think you just got to find what inspires you, and then that'll just kind of keep you going.
Which leads to the question, because I love jazz, and I'm not I'm not an absolute jazz connoisseur, but like to ask you, all right, what inspires you? What jazz musicians or composers are inspirational to you? Or pieces of music?
Oh my gosh, it's been yeah, it's been like 10 years since I've like studied jazz.
Okay.
I guess in the band we did a lot of big band stuff, but I guess I was a pretty lazy musician as far as like studying goes.
All right.
Like in school, to be in this jazz band, everyone played like this horn instrument, and they had to be in like band classes, and they needed to be in music classes. And then once they did those things, then they could be, in the jazz band. Whereas for guitarists, it's a little bit differently. They like just so desperately needed a guitarist. So that when I auditioned, they're like, all right, here you go. And like, well, like there are no guitar classes and there are no guitarists in the big band. So like show up, play guitar, and we're happy. And so I was kind of like the straggler in that sense.
That's awesome. That's actually awesome. Not to deviate from that. There's been this one thing that like this phenomenon I've been watching in what do you call it? In like, there's a TikTok channel or Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you prefer to seek it out. They're everywhere. And they go around and interview people and ask, how much do you get paid? And one of the things that I noticed,
Yeah.
right? You've seen it, right? And there's always people, and they're making good money. The people are making normal money, and then they go up to like the computer programmer. How much you making? He's like, well, I've got 2 jobs. One of them I show up for. The other, they still don't know that I think I'm still getting paid, but I don't actually work for the company anymore. And yet, I'm pulling in $140K at each job. And it's like, it just reminds me of that. Like there is, when you have a demand that is not being met, people will be like, welcome, we need you,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, to have those in-demand skills, whether to be a jazz guitarist or to be something else. If you have a certain set of skills, there are people that will seek you out, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I've noticed like throughout music, it's either one or the other. You either need to be this master of none who can adapt to your surroundings, and if maybe sync house asks you need music in this style, you have something to give them, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Or you can have this expertise, you can be the session musician, and you're like the best of your craft. If someone wants, like guitar on like an electronic song, you're that guy, and everyone wants you for that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I guess in music, there's no one mold for, meeting meeting a demand. It's really like adapting is like kind of its own skill that people look for.
But adapting is such a powerful skill in life, because, and you think about that with music. I think it's so evident that there was this picture that I saw the other day, and it was on LinkedIn or Instagram, I don't know where. But it was talking about standardized testing, and it showed all of these animals lining up, and it says, okay, we are going to test all of you in a very fair way. I need everyone to go and run and climb the tree. And there was a rabbit, an elephant, and the idea being, we're all good at different things. We all have different things we're good at, but yet each of us needs to be in a way, adaptable. And let's move beyond the animals that they can't climb. Like in reality, if that was people and those were musicians, they would all still have to try to climb the same tree, but they might do it in 25 different ways or to accomplish the same goal. And that's kind of the cool thing about being adaptable, is that you can go at a situation in a different way. Do you ever see a long time ago, the Tom Hanks movie Apollo 11? It's old school, right? But what I like about that movie is that they had the second team that was on the ground that literally was like, all right, we've got a square filter, a round filter that needs to fit into a square box, and so that these guys don't suffocate. How, with this is what's on the rocket, how do we take this and make this fit in here? And they pulled it off because they're NASA engineers and they're extremely brilliant, but they pulled it off and they built something that these guys could build in a short amount of time with what was available to them. That just has always been like the perfect analogy for being adaptable in my mind. But pulling it back to music,
totally.
What are some of the ways that a musician has to be adaptable?
Yeah, I guess the example that I've given before about maybe a sync house. There's a commercial coming up, and Apple wants like this upbeat electronic track.
Okay.
Or another example, maybe someone else wants this mellow, smooth jazz track. A master in electronic music has one track for the the first one, and maybe someone who makes lo-fi music has one for the latter. But being able to kind of throw your net out at all opportunities that come by can kind of come out to be pretty fruitful, because there are these opportunities that they're not just asking one or two people. Like these sync houses are asking multiple people, and so being able to cast as many lines as you can is huge.
That's awesome. I like that. And I like that analogy as well in life, to be able to cast multiple lines. I have multiple different YouTube channels that I build, and that are things that are kind of my babies. I've got This Is My Chantre Show, and I try to find people that bring in interesting, inspiring content. And I like talking to people of all walks of life. Just if you have an interesting path, like, dude, I want to hear about it. I want to talk about it. But then I've got my financial podcast where I don't know much about money, but I'm trying to learn. So I'm bringing on all these really interesting people to talk to me about business and money. And then I have my daughter's channel that's like all kids stuff. And then I have my wife's channel. She's like a famous singer in Vietnam. And, we have all types of stuff we do for her. That's music and like entertainment. And people are like, dude, why do you do so many different things? Focus on one. And I was like, well, you know what? First of all, I like many things. And second of all, you never know which is going to be the thing that just takes off. And, can be something that feeds something else, that maybe this takes off and then that helps this, which helps this, which helps this, and then you're having fun in all different types of ways. So those different lines.
Yeah, totally. And even thinking like a few years down the line, 3 successful YouTube channels is so much more valuable than 1 successful YouTube channel, just in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And you never know what different audiences are going to want to see different things. Like there was that Ryan's World channel that the kid, still one of the biggest YouTube channels in the world. And and Ryan's World, his parents then started the the second channel that's all about their studios. Like, this is the behind the scenes of us making these videos, which is, for me as a filmmaker, super interesting
Huh.
to watch how they make it, and
Yeah, totally.
so there's like these different channels that are focusing on different things, and they're just like, well, we have different audiences, there's different things, but again, at the same time, it's also about different revenue streams, which is pretty brilliant. Now let's get
Yeah,
back.
absolutely.
Go ahead, continue, brother. Sorry. There's a tiny bit of lag, so I'd love to hear your thought on that.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, like, when I sit down for a studio session, I'm not necessarily planning for what genre of music I'm going to make. And so sometimes it comes out as like house or electronic or hip hop. And so for each of those different styles that I'm making, I actually have different like music aliases that I post on. I
Oh,
have one
dude,
for lo-fi, one for electronic, one for house. And so, yeah, I mean, that analogy is just perfect for what we're talking about.
that's awesome, man. Well, let me ask you this. Imagine you're sitting down for a new track. What's your creative
Yeah.
process like when you start? Do you have any rituals or routines that you kind of tap into? What's your process for getting going?
Yeah. So when I was in jazz band, my what I was doing is I was doing solos. So a lot of
Okay.
guitar improvisation. I have this band behind me, horns, piano, bass, and they, set down the chord progression and I just riff. And I, bounce back and forth with them. And it's this really cool energy of just like creative process happening in real time. And so in my production, my first thing is I just need to start with something, any chord progression, any kind of melody line that I can use to inspire the next piece or the next element and so on. And so starting out, uh, I, have now kind of forgotten a lot of the music theory I learned as a kid.
Right.
But the flow is where I, noodle around on the piano. I kind of remember what some chord shapes look like until I come up with, something. And after that, it kind of just flows effortlessly. I do the drums, I do some counter melodies, and then I go on guitar. Um, Luckily now I have some awesome collaborators and friends who are classically trained musicians who are more than willing to start beats for me, send me guitar chords and piano chords, which totally cuts off that piece of the process that I maybe don't enjoy as much or I'm not
Mhm.
an expert in. Um, and so, yeah, lately I've been really appreciating the art of collaboration in that sense. Finding people who appreciate the things that you find annoying.
Oh, dude, I love that. I love that because I just, on my other podcast, I've been talking about networking because,
Hmm.
my friend Grace Liao, who's also a colleague, came onto the podcast and she started talking about networking. And in the business community, networking, it's like this kind of like this, the dirty
Hmm.
word, where, because there are a lot of people that do it in a way that's like, hey, you know, let's see what you can do for me, and you feel like someone's trying to take advantage, and yet there's
Right.
this flip side where, with collaborating, this we were trying to redefine it, and literally in the video I just posted, we were talking about how, in ways, it's kind of like we shine a light for each other. When collaboration, when
Hmm.
networking is done well, it's not about someone coming in and going, like, what can you do for me? It's like, this is what I'm good at. That's what you're good at.
Right.
Let's look at about how we can be awesome together because we're both good at different things. And that collaboration is absolutely awesome because, you know, the reality is, as much as we would all like to be a jack of all trades and do everything, we can't, and
Hmm.
I'm good at hosting, but I don't have a lot of information. I have my information. And when I get other guests on to interview, they tell me their perspective and their story. And then we can make something awesome. I was trying to do those where I talk to the camera by myself, like podcasts. And it felt so
Yeah.
weird, man. Just like, and this is the reason that you need it. Yeah, it's not. It's so much more fun to be like this, because it's collaboration. It can take us places that I can't
Mhm.
go by myself.
Yeah, totally. It's funny you mentioned that. I went to college for computer science actually. There the kind of idea of networking is kind of like slimy, like what you're talking
Yeah,
about. You're at a networking session and you're wearing these suits and you're talking, and in the back of your mind you both know that this is like, we're trying to get something from each other.
yeah,
What I love about music and just like social media in general is that it's so casual and you're
yeah.
able to, become friends first. And once you're friends, you can realize, the mutual altruism that you can do for each other. But if it doesn't work out, you're still friends. It's not like,
Yep.
oh, you can't do anything for me. Like, see you later. It's like, can we help each other? If so, great. This is a great relationship. If not, like, well, friendship still stays alive.
And this is something that I've noticed with my podcast. I really enjoy is like I bring on, I've had like almost 150 guests now, right? And then of that, about 30, 40 of those became like good acquaintances, people that I connect to that, comment on
Mm-hmm.
stuff I do. Um, 10 of those became like friends. And about 4 or 5 of them have actually become like active collaborators on let's build stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
And we've started working on projects, like really cool projects that might have just been like a comment that someone mentioned. And it doesn't have to be like that. Like that the where
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in no way was I trying to get something out of it, but yet just in our conversation, something was said like, dude, what you like that too? There was this great, Henry Cavill, who used to be Superman. I love Henry Cavill, such an
Uh-huh.
interesting guy in real life. And his big thing, he's a gamer, like, and he won't even hide it. Like he on his social media is like, I'm gonna film me building my own new like gaming PC. And there was one interview. I saw this clip last night. His big thing, Warhammer 3000, and so like that's his thing. And so he was on this interview, and they were like, "What's your like real secret? Like, what are you really into in real life?" And he's like, this. And there's another person that was, and like there was like 2 other guests in the interview. One girl was like, started laughing at him, and then like the other guest over here was just like, "Dude, which team are you playing right now?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm using this team." And the other guy's like, "Oh, I've been playing this team." And Henry Cavill and him, they just completely ignore everyone else, and they just like, he's like, "We we're gonna, yeah, after, okay." And like, they're just like, boom, you saw in that moment there was this real connection that happened that was not a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
Like these 2 guys were like, yeah, fine, okay, yep, yep. Boom, it was done. It was sealed. Like there was now
Mm-hmm.
a friendship, and you could see it happening in real time. And it was so cool to see that there was just suddenly this spark, this connection that these 2 people were going into this interview. They had no idea what was coming. And then boom,
Mm-hmm.
in just
Right.
one moment, the door opened. And like you got to take chances for
That's
that to
great.
happen. What are the main sources of inspiration for your music? What are some of your sources of inspiration right now?
I really just got to say my collaborators, like in the literal sense of inspiration, like where my music stems from. It's those people who are, writing the chords and, building the foundation of what I'm creating.
That's awesome.
Um, it's also cool that I'm also, most of the music I listen to is part of the music label that I'm running, Purity Label, uh, where I'm kind of listening to demos from uh, new artists, signing tracks to help new artists get heard in the lo-fi scene. And so it's kind of cool when I get to be inspired by this new talent in the scene, in the genre, versus the opposite when people are getting inspired by kind of the bigger artists. It's cool that most of my intake is discovering new talent, and that can kind of be refreshing. Where new artists really don't feel a need to fit a mold; they can be very transparent with their style and their inspirations.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I just find that really inspiring personally.
Right. This is something that my wife talks to me about. Like, for when you're a new artist, you can do anything. Like, you're like, I want to do this, and you go for it, man. But when you're an established artist, there's like people want you
Hmm.
to do certain things, you know. And like Beyonce had that one album that she brought out, and then people were like, "Why does it not sound like your old stuff?" And she's like, "Because I don't want it to. I want it to sound like what I want it to." And so it is interesting that there's that freedom. But talk to me about the lo-fi scene, because that's something that's interesting. I'm fascinated by lo-fi because I love listening to it. First of all, like, it is my go-to if
Hmm.
I need to get anything done, and I think that's like a lot of people. Like, if you need music that is like a go-to for like getting stuff done, I love lo-fi because it's not like
Hmm.
it has all the perfect balance for me of, like, you got a little bit of inspiration of jazz, but then you've got, it's more of that chill. Like, I was a big fan of like chill hop back in the day, and some of that.
Oh yeah.
Just huge fan of that. But talk to me, how did you get into lo-fi?
So yeah, lo-fi was this kind of started as this like SoundCloud subgenre.
Hmm.
I'm sure it dates before that with like Nujabes uh, and all of these, OG hip hop producers. But I was introduced to it as this like SoundCloud subgenre of these gritty, dusty lo-fi beats. Um, I really appreciated how kind of chill and effortless it sounded.
Yeah.
Um, Nowadays it's a bit more commercialized, I'd say. Like, the sound is less gritty, it's more clean, it's kind
Yeah.
of has this vibe of study beats and uh, stress relief music. And as a byproduct of that, there are kind of these really interesting subgenres,
Mm.
um, where we have like our sleep music, our like jazz beats. There are some really cool like Japanese artists making this Asian inspired lo-fi sound. um, and it's cool, in addition, that we're all independent artists. Like,
Yeah.
there, you might see all these like music labels around, but they're all independent labels where they sign tracks on a track to track basis. And so it's a very supportive community of lots of collaboration with, amongst artists, but also with labels. And overall, just a very supportive, uh, cool community to be part of.
Well, that's awesome too, because and I'm not going to hate on the music industry, but yet for a long time there was one of the challenges, and what I love social media, and I love the direction the music industry is going with a lot of the new aggregates, whether, whatever they might be, and then a lot of the new labels, that people have this freedom to
Hmm.
kind of do and create what they want. Because it used to be like, you think back to, even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even, a musician or artist suddenly would disappear. People are like, where did they go? I love that artist. It's like, they didn't go anywhere, but like, they just weren't hot, and so they weren't getting promoted as much. And it's still,
Right.
I'm sure, still happens now, but not to the same degree. People have much more power with their own personal online presence, whether that be through Instagram, TikTok, or whether however they're promoting themselves on, for it is kind of a social media place with SoundCloud. It's kind of a different thing than Spotify and others, that you have the ability to promote yourself. That there's this different vibe to music. So that's really awesome to hear about that collaborative style in the community.
Hmm. Yeah, I personally love this streaming era of music because it's
Mhm.
really the new democratization of music, where it used to be, even maybe 10 years ago, you needed a music label to get your music on iTunes,
Yeah,
which sounds
right,
crazy nowadays
right.
because now anyone can upload their music onto Spotify, make money, make revenue, and then anyone can post on TikTok. And TikTok is also kind of even more so a democratized platform where the
Yeah.
most engaged content gets the most views. And so, the most creative, the most interesting, well, the
Within
most
reason.
engaging content are the ones that, uh, uh, cut through the surface.
Yeah.
And so it can really happen to anyone, which is awesome. Like that, it was not a thing before the streaming era.
Yeah. Well, this is so true. It's like, literally, anyone's music. There was this one girl that went on TikTok and she's like, this is my dad's music, and he loves his music. And I would love for you guys to help make this song be heard because he's such a talented musician. And like, you think about that, like my mom's former partner, and her, he had a band, right? And one day we were riding with him in his car, and he pulled out a CD. It was a CD, like even like this is recent, but he was still like, "This is our CD," and I was like, "Okay." He's like, "I'm gonna put it in, put it in," and started playing it, and it was phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. He's like, "This is my little, my little jazz band. We play together," and he played upright bass, and it was just, and we were just listening to it. We were blown away. Like, this is the type of stuff that would have been made into a vinyl, in the 70s, and then it would have been hitting the jazz scene.
Hmm.
It was so good. And we're like, where can we hear more of your music? Oh no, we've got this CD. This is this. It was like, do you have more copies of this CD? Oh no, this is our master. Like, this is what we've got. I think I might have a. And I was just like, you need to protect this. Like, this needs to be someplace very safe and backed up. And he's like, yeah, I think I can try to get a backup. And we were just blown away that it wasn't out there, but yet it can be
Right.
now. It can be. And I think this was maybe like 6 years ago. And so now I would be like, let's throw that up on, on Spotify, like right away. He would have had a huge following, because it
Hmm.
has changed. That the game has really changed for people, and that's just so awesome.
Yeah, in order for him to, gain a big following back then when he had the CD, you have to, quit your job,
Yep.
move to a big city with a lot of, record labels and record stores and like go door to door
Yeah.
or wait outside for for an exec to walk out. Like it's so much more accessible now, which is
Yeah.
just awesome.
Right. And it's not just this, it's the film industry too. It's other industries too. Like, you could get someone, it used to be like, if someone wanted to become an actor, you had to do this, you had to go through the Hollywood school system, you had to move to LA, you had to study with the in teacher, and then you would, through one of your classmates, get into a student film, and then they would introduce you to an agent. And it was just also closed off, and it was all like so toxic. Honestly, it was really toxic. Like, it was a whole system built up on people's hopes and dreams, and then it was so random because you could have this absolutely talented individual that just didn't even notice because maybe they didn't know how to play the social game correctly. And I mean, granted, there is still,
Hmm.
you got to learn how to work, and do self promotion and these things. But that system before was much more geared toward extroverts, people that were really good at getting themselves out there. Whereas now, you can be an introvert and just do your own thing and live your own way and still be able to collaborate, still to be able to be creative. You can be of a different personality. You can be anywhere in the world and go out and make your own content. Like, this is my short film, and now I'm going to submit it for Cannes or Sundance. You can do that and have there be no problem. And it's not just that industry; it's a ton of industries that we have this new change. I'm loving, man.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Like the extroverts idea of networking or collaborating is like showing up to a party and chatting everyone's ear off, whereas the introverts, it's like laying in your bed and DMing your friends. And I would argue that the
Right?
latter is even more like more results that way.
I think that there's a point to it. Like, if you can, there was this great book on success called "Barking Up the Wrong Tree" by this guy named Eric Barker. It's a phenomenal book if you want to
Mhm.
read it. And he debates introverts versus extroverts. He looks at all these different things, like who's more successful. And he's like, one of the most powerful things you can do is to go back through your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, and shoot a message to your friend. And literally, don't ask them for anything, but just sit there and send them a message and say, hey, are you working on anything interesting right now? I'd love to hear what's going on with you. He says that can turn into more powerful stuff than anything that you can think about, or anything that you could, like any of your side hustles or your ideas that you're going to just listen to people, talk about what they're doing, and see if maybe you can provide them with something. Maybe you can help them with something, and see where that goes. Because sometimes you just have to
Mhm.
take a chance.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works. Like some of my closest collaborators now are people that just sent me a DM request and it was just sitting in my inbox and I
Right.
check it out and want to collaborate and for whatever reason on that particular day I was like sure let's do it and it just turned into this great relationship. Or one time somebody commented on one of my posts and I checked for some reason I was compelled to check out their profile. Saw that they had cool videos. I followed them back, uh, and then next thing you know we're like hitting it off.
That's awesome. Well, let me ask you this, man. What I want to hear a little bit more about your creative process. Like, what are some of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges you face in your creative process, and how do you overcome them? Because we all get these challenges, whether it be writer's block or something else. But what are some of the challenges that you face when you compose and create music, and how do you overcome them?
Hmm. Yeah, when I create, it's kind of this like routine of like at night, my girlfriend goes to bed. I go to the studio, put on my headphones, and work for like maybe 3 to 4 hours every night.
Right here, I'm feeling I'm feeling you.
Oh yeah. And a lot of times I don't even know it, but I kind of look back at demos and maybe if it's like throughout the whole week, kind of everything I make kind of sounds the same. It might
Hmm.
be maybe using the same techniques, or maybe it's feeling uninspired and kind of resorting back to old habits. Yeah, I think the best way to overcome that is to change your environment, change your tool set. Uh, we talked about being resourceful before, but like one of my favorite things to do when I'm kind of feeling this kind of stagnant behavior going on in my music is just kind of scroll through, find a new drum kit to download. And it kind of this has a lot of like samples and drums and I'll challenge myself to make a beat with only this drum kit. It
Oh,
challenges myself to find new samples to put into my repertoire. And who knows, maybe my new favorite, snare drum is just sitting out there somewhere waiting for me to find it.
I love
Uh,
that.
and so kind of forcing myself to discover new sounds, new inspiration is the way to do it.
There was my wife plays this game with my daughter. Now my wife is a phenomenal like musician and artist. Like she's actually, even though she's a phenomenal singer and artist, I think she's a better like phenomenal singer and musician. I think she's almost a better artist. Like, and she'd kill me for saying that because, and I'm not. She's a phenomenal. She's like winner of Vietnam Idol, original winner of Vietnam Idol. She's legit, man. She's good,
Hmm.
but she's so talented with art. Like all of her dresses, she and her mom made them. So for all of her costumes, like on all of her biggest shows, all of the stuff she handmade, like handmade it with her mom. Like they're doing individual sequins on
Wow.
each. It's nuts, right? So my daughter plays this game with my wife, and they
Yeah.
take like one of those like little drawing boards that you can erase real quick with like it's magnetic. You draw there, and so my wife will draw a design and she'll hand it to my daughter and says, turn this into an animal. And so my
Mm.
daughter then has to go and take that and turn it into something, draw it into an animal. And she'll give her a shape and say, create something with this. And they challenge each other and they just go back and forth with these designs that they create. And it pushes each of them outside of a box. And I love that. And I've seen my wife get, clients will come to her and say, we want to incorporate this into your song, or we want to incorporate this element into your costume. Can you do that? And she will, because, and it's kind of like each time she does it, it's like level up, it's just like you have to do something that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. And so I had the fun thing, like, um, my wife has, we've had to adapt to TikTok, and TikTok's a whole different ball game. And we didn't quite get how to do it because we're like, hang on, do we promote just our music? Do we promote fun stuff? Do we promote what do we put on there? And what we found was the trends in it seemingly is a lot of like almost comedic content. And that's not what our bread and butter was. Our bread and butter was like video blogs and music and inspirational type content. but people
Mm-hmm.
wanted to watch funny videos. So we started doing some, but still stuff that was true to our brand, right? But we started making some funny like videos. And it was just simple, like, our daily interactions, but kind of like almost sitcomized. So like, it was like these really short videos, like almost like a real quick, like one liner. And then, you get that music that's like, it's always sunny in Philadelphia type playing, dun, 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 dun. And so it's
Yeah,
kind of like that fun punchline. We posted a couple of those, and yeah, they just people loving them. They were blowing up on TikTok and Instagram for my wife, but it forced me to have to act in comedy. And I trained as an actor, but I love drama. I love drama,
yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I've never felt good at comedy, man. But I was like, all right, I'm having to lean into comedy right now and see if I can pull that off. And not just that, it's
Mm-hmm.
comedy, and I'm doing it in Vietnamese. And I speak Vietnamese, albeit not like, I mean, I'm fluent and fluid, not completely fluent, but still acting in another language. That's not easy, man. So it
Oh yeah.
pushed me beyond my limit. But like when I pushed myself into an area that I was uncomfortable, suddenly I found like not just success, but I found that I was capable of doing more than I believed. And that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that etch a sketch exercise that you had mentioned.
Right.
I had a conversation actually last night with a collaborator of mine. It's like it's this trope in with musicians that they love to start new projects
And
before
never.
finishing the previous one. And so they end up with all these projects, but me and him are actually the opposite. Like we're finishers.
Oh, I love that.
We start a project and we don't want to waste our time, and so we really want to finish what we started. And so it's a lot of the times it's like you might not like the initial idea, but you need to really push through and turn it into
Yeah.
something that you enjoy. And so yeah, I like I guess that's the two workflows of a musician.
Right. Well, I love both sides, and I actually like that because I am as well, like as a producer, as a film producer, which is what I've done for many years. People ask, well, what do you do? And I'm like, because film producer and music producers are different. Film producers have a different
Mm-hmm.
role, and I was like, I get shit done. Like I finish projects because everyone can come up with a fun, creative idea, but it's really hard to take it to completion. But for me, I just like I'm like you know I'm really stubborn, and I just kind of I get through it, and I enjoy that process. I enjoy kind of pushing through, and some people do not.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
I have a hard time getting into that creative flow of something new because I have my way of doing it. So I like hearing that I'm not alone on that.
Yeah, totally.
Now, what about this? What advice could you give someone who's just getting going in this musical path? Maybe diving into the world of lo-fi or diving into just producing music or creating music in general.
Yeah. So from my experience, my advice would be not to dive in. Actually,
Oh, talk to me
um,
about that.
yeah, totally. It's well. So my experience is experimenting with a bunch of different sounds. So I got
Mm,
into music because I just really wanted to make hip hop beats. And so I started with hip hop beats, but then my head got turned for electronic music and trap music and lo-fi, and I would kind of have these month-long intervals where I'm like, you're really learning this genre and then really learning this genre. Um, I think it's really important to test the waters before you dive in too deep. Uh, and when it's a genre of music that you're kind of dedicating your career to, it really needs to be something that you enjoy and you enjoy making. And so, yeah, my advice is find that niche
yeah,
first. And then
yeah.
once you're sure that that's what you really want to do, then, go for it.
That's really sound advice. It's like imagine there was when you're describing that, I got this visualization of like a parent taking their kid and like throwing them into a sport, and like I'll be the give myself as the example. I am not built like an American football player. I'm just not. I went to graduate school with a classmate who was a former player for the Oakland Raiders when they were in Oakland. Now they're in
Hmm.
Vegas, but he played for the Raiders. He's a big dude, and he lost a lot of weight after his playing days. Like he slimmed down, and he still was just this monstrously big individual, and like his legs were the same size as my torso. And one day I had been going to the gym and I'd been doing CrossFit and I was feeling fit and I was like, yeah, man, I'm looking good. And we were in class and everyone's taking off their shirts because it was a hot day outside and everyone's wearing like, fitted clothes. And then he's like, and I was just like, put my stuff back on. He's a big guy, and luckily my mom was smart enough to, when I was a kid and I was wanting to get into sports, she one summer signed me up for a bunch of like taster classes. Let's go try out tennis. And you know what I learned that summer? I learned a lot of what I hate in sports. I am
Hmm.
not a fan of tennis. Not a fan at all. I am not a fan of golf. It is just not the pace of the game I like. I'm not good at basketball. Like, as much as I tried, I am not good at it. Bowling is fun in some circumstances, but as a sport would make me go crazy. And I played a bunch of
Oh
other,
yeah.
did a bunch of other stuff, right? But I found out finally at the end of the summer that I was good and I enjoyed martial arts. And then I also found out that I was good at volleyball. And, there were things that I was good at and I enjoyed. But it took that time because if she had done like, you know what, son, I want you to be the American football player and throw me into that, dude, I would have been destroyed. Maybe they would have helped me get up, but I am not built like those guys. I just
Hmm.
like it wasn't a match, but I'm a very good martial artist, and now I'm a black belt and I got really good at that because something that I found out that I was a fit for. And luckily, my mom had the intelligence to not toss me into one thing that I then put a ton of time into, and it wasn't that great. And my daughter the other day was talking to me, and she's like, I have her trying a lot of different classes, and she's like, I don't like this one so much. And I was like, then you don't have to go. Like, that's powerful. You figured out what you don't like, but we'll still try some other things. And she's like, I really like piano and I like art. And I was like, and that's important. I'm still going to send her to try other things because of things that can teach her, even if it's not help. Like she's loving it right now. Like my family's really tall, and with that, a lot of us round. So I want her to
Hmm.
go to some dance classes because they will teach her to stand tall, and that's something that's really important for my family. Just because we're all like, 6 foot something and rounding. But it's about getting that taste and learning what you love,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I had the exact same experience. Like my parents throwing me into every activity,
right?
and I remember, well, one of the activities was martial arts, and I actually didn't enjoy that very much. And I remember being so nervous about telling them, like, I kind of
Yeah,
want to quit this, and it felt like a kind of a failure. It's like it's something that I'm giving up on. And when I told them, I was so surprised that they fully supported me and they're like, all right, great, we don't have to go. It was like right before my black belt ceremony. I needed like one more week to be a
right.
black belt. And I said, you know what, I don't really like this. I want to quit. And I think their support in that, it was a really great lesson in that trying something and deciding that it's not for you is not a failure. That's actually a growth.
It's huge. It's such powerful growth to like, it. What was it? There was this one quote that I heard about music, and it was like, music is not made by the notes. Music is made by the silence between the notes. And like what you're not
Hmm.
playing is just as important as what you are playing. And so, in artwork, and especially if you're creating like a sculpture, if you are working with a piece of rock, you look at some of the ancient sculptures, and the stuff they were able to do was amazing. But what was important was what was being removed, because you cannot create the like Michelangelo's David without knowing what you need to get rid of. Because before it was the David statue, it was a giant piece of stone, and getting rid of stuff was equally as important as what was being put in, because what was being put in was
Hmm.
simply attention, thought, And, it was mainly what's being removed to create this thing. And I think it's so much in our lives as well, the same.
Yeah, totally. My coming from a technical background with computer science, my first compositions, I wanted to make them so complex and technically interesting with tons of notes and
Yeah.
interesting scales and stuff. Uh, and it took me a while to realize that it's really like the artistry is in how intentional the notes are, not how
Oh,
impressive or technical they are.
exactly. Some of the greatest songs, like some of my favorite songs, have been written with. There was this Instagram post going around, and it's like how all of the songs of the last 50 years have been written with the same chord structure. And these guys started playing these four chords in circle, and then they sang all these notes on top. But yet, each one of those was done in a stylistically different way and had different intention and different thoughts. It's not about the complexity, it's about how you do it. How what is your artistic touch on it? Because let's be real, like there's a million different ways to do four chords. You can do it so many different ways.
Yeah, totally.
How do you where do you see the direction of lo-fi going? Where do you see the direction or of some of these subgenres of lo-fi that you were talking about? Where do you see this going in the next 10, 20 years?
I see more genre fusions, definitely. In terms of the like lo-fi girl label, I've
Hmm.
seen quite a lot of people coming in who are not necessarily music producers, but they're kind of classically trained musicians in different classical instruments. Uh, and in addition, like this is very topical. A few weeks ago, Lo-Fi Girl just launched their new synthwave label,
Yeah, right.
uh, where they're now releasing this like ambient electronic music. And at first, it kind of seems like a huge left turn, but the more you think about it, it's like the lo-fi genre as like a, for lack of a better term, vibe is so cohesive with this, chilled out, um, mellow, stress relieving music that just fills the ambiance rather than has a particular statement to make or message. Uh, and I think uh, this like motif can be applied to so many different genres that you wouldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to see where it goes.
I'm a huge fan. I got my go-to cassette back here of synthwave that I like literally like just tracking down good synthwave music was so hard, and I love listening to it on cassette because it just has that's how synthwave was kind of like put out there. And so I love
Hmm.
that tape sound. But I'm so excited for this new channel and like all this new music coming out. I was like, this is awesome, because we
Hmm.
we have certain musical genres get saturated full, and we get saturated with those genres, you know what I mean? And like even with um my wife was talking to me about hip hop. I'm a huge hip hop fan. I love hip hop. But lately I haven't listened to as much hip hop because what's mainstream hip hop isn't my taste. And so, but yet I can
Hmm.
go out and find there's still the taste of hip hop that I like because I have that. I grew up with Wu Tang and Fuji's and things like that, and so I want to seek out that still. And there's still people doing that type of hip hop, and you can still find stuff out there. And I love that with Lo-Fi Girl and now with the synthwave line that there's this attention being paid to musical styles that might have not been as mainstream or as like as pushed before, but are awesome.
Hmm.
It's awesome,
Yeah, definitely excited to see where it goes.
right? Now, what are some upcoming projects or releases that you're excited about?
So yeah, I have my own Lo-Fi Girl EP dropping next week.
Sweet.
It's called Half Past Three. It's like a more ambient lo-fi sleep themed project, uh, and I think it's a big step in like maturing my sound from a more uh, percussion drum based style to really focusing on interesting melodies and ambiance. I'm really excited to share it.
That's really awesome, man. That's really awesome. I'm excited to listen. By the time this should be going up next week, so I'll drop your interview right about the time your album's coming up. So that should be awesome, man.
Perfect.
That's really cool. What are some of the inspirations that you pulled in for this?
I have been playing around with the sleep genre of lo-fi for quite a bit now. There has been this very prominent lo-fi label called Sleep Tales that I've been working with for a while.
Okay.
Um, and I was quite lucky that Lo-Fi Girl has recently opened up their genre web into the more sleep-based beats. Um, I found it a cool challenge because sleep lo-fi as a whole is, focusing on these like classical piano melodies and very ambient
Yeah.
nature, but something that I thought was missing in the genre was interesting percussive elements. I think people are too afraid to be creative with uh, their percussion and drums in that genre. And so I kind of fused inspirations from, uh, lo-fi girl style lo-fi, where you have kind of these more upbeat drums and more
Yeah.
interesting percussion with the kind of slow ambient nature of the sleep lo-fi. And I tried to blend them in a really creative way.
You got me.
So I hope it
Yep.
comes off as
Yeah, you got
that.
me excited. I want to go listen to this now. So I'm looking forward to next week, man, when it drops. That sounds awesome.
Sweet.
That's really awesome. Well, that's awesome. Well, let me ask you one last question and then we'll finish up here. Like, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think broadly it would be not to worry about things that haven't happened yet.
Hmm.
I think, especially in college and in high school, there are these looming milestones of graduation and, interviews for colleges and jobs and stuff. And I think I built up scenarios in my head, uh, gave myself this anxiety that, at the end of the day, was just uh, not founded, right? Everything turns out fine. Everything's
Yeah.
going to be fine, and it's a waste of time to worry about things that haven't happened yet. Um, I guess there isn't a connection to music with that,
Doesn't need to be.
but
That's just great
that's
advice,
that's
though.
my life advice for myself.
Right? No, that's awesome advice, man.